I want to ask you this morning, do you ever find yourself wondering why in the world that the God of all creation pays attention to you? I mean, with all that God has to do, running the universe and all, isn't it amazing that He still has time for each one of us? And on the other hand, why do we belittle God? I mean, when we're faced with big problems, usually the very first thing we do is to turn to God. But for the most part, we don't do that with our little, inconsequential concerns of life. But think about this. 99% of life is composed of the little stuff. Here, Jesus tells us that God numbers the very hairs of our heads. Such a God as that is aware of the entirety of our being, the big stuff as well as the little stuff. Now, looking in this passage today, we find that Jesus compares our lives to sparrows. Throughout the Bible, we can find examples of our lives being compared to something in the natural world of God's creation. Looking through the Psalms, you'll find that there are songs that are filled with glorifying God's creation. For example, we can turn to Psalm number 104. This is a song all about creation. This psalmist remembers how God built His palace out of the depths of the ocean, how He set the earth on its foundation, how He had created the mountains and the valleys, the springs and the rivers, the wild animals and all the birds. For this psalmist, the majesty of God is seen in the clothing of creation, the heavens and the earth. Throughout the history of Christian spirituality, there has often been this profound sense of God's presence in nature. Turning to the 8th Psalm, the writer here marvels at the creation again. And according to Eugene Peterson's translation of this psalm, this writer says, "I look up at your macro skies, dark and enormous, your handmade sky jewelry, the moon and stars mounted in their settings." And then he goes on to say, "Why do you bother with us? Why take a second look our way?" This psalm writer understood the greatness of creation and the smallness and insignificance of human beings. So we find in our passage today that Jesus compares us to sparrows. Sparrows. Sparrows are all around us. Sparrows are those little brown birds that seem to be everywhere. Those mundane, ever-present, unimportant, unimpressive, unassuming little birds. Sparrows don't draw attention to themselves. Sparrows are not majestic like eagles with their white heads and their 8-foot wide wingspans. Nor do they have elegant long legs like the blue heron. Nor do they soar gracefully in the wind like seagulls. Nor do they squawk noisily like the crows. And they don't stretch out in a posed position like the cormorants. We take notice to eagles and to blue herons and seagulls, crows and cormorants, but we don't really notice the sparrows. We typically don't go sparrow watching, do we? No. Sparrows are insignificant as you see them momentarily flutter by. Normally, we don't even bother to pause and look at them because they're so ordinary. You may not realize it, but there are 41 different species of sparrows worldwide, with 15 of those species right here in America. And Jesus reassures us that the God of the universe watches over these insignificant, mundane, ordinary birds. Jesus is talking to his disciples one day about their fears. And he's telling them that there would come a time when they would face persecution and troubles. But he told them not to worry. And he reminds them that 2 sparrows are sold for a penny, and yet not one of them will fall to the ground apart from your Father. I think that's incredible. In the midst of the wonder of all creation, God never forgets a sparrow, and he never forgets us. Our God has this time to create turkey buzzards, elephants, mountain lions, and aardvarks, and yet he still cares about us. If our God cares about the mundane sparrow, we know that he cares about even us. Jesus reassures us that you are of more value than many sparrows. Jesus told the disciples to find comfort in the fact that God cares for these lowly, mundane sparrows. Think about it, he said, how much God cares for you. In God's eye, everything is important. Not just the spectacular. Everything in creation was ordained by God, has been labeled good. The Creator who established the moon and the stars and put the planets into orbit still has his eye on the sparrow and on you and on me. So that's the message. That is the good news for all of us. The God of all creation, the wonder-working God, God Most High, the awesome God, the God who creates one in every 5,000 lobsters bright blue, the God who created Leviathan and the behemoth, this God still cares enough to watch over the little sparrow. The same God cares enough to watch over you, to watch over me. Amen. Would you please